Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our LIU LearnOn webinar series. Today's topic for this time slot is face-to-face to online. We're going to be talking about explaining. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be uploaded into the archive. And just so you know, as we've talked about in all of our webinars, this is the team that is powering the LearnOn site. It's a combination of several different divisions. You can find all of our contact information there. I'm listed as well under Educational Technology Services. My name is Ben Smith. I'm the Supervisor of Educational Technology at the Lincoln Intermediate Unit. A couple of things about this webinar meeting that is maybe perhaps a little different than some of the Zoom meetings you might be attending. And while the note says chat, microphone, and camera have been disabled, we didn't actually disable chat for you to chat to the panelists. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, this one is a little bit smaller than some of our others, is if you could help us with some of the things that you're looking for out of explaining, like what types of ways do you explain things to students? So you should be able to open up your chat and type that in, and it will come to all the panelists. So that's Nicole and myself for this webinar. So feel free to add that in. You could also add in your content area because again, as we watch things roll by, we'll try and perhaps be a little bit specific to those types of folks who are able to do that. So you're welcome to type into the chat. And thanks to Jen for kicking us off there. If you have questions, however, we're going to ask you to use the Q&A pod. So you see the little symbol here that shows the Q&A pod picture. So you want to make sure that you're looking at that, and that's where you can post your questions in. If you'd like to raise your hand to use your microphone, you can do that. And then we'll see how we can handle it at the end. And of course, you don't want to leave before the end of the webinar because we will redirect you to the Act 48 credit link. One other thing that I'm going to mention, this one is going to be a little bit different in that I'm going to be jumping from different windows. And so when I stop a screen share and then restart it, it's going to jump to full screen. So for those of you that might be multitasking, I apologize up front for that, but you'll see as we do some demonstrations of things why there's a need for that. So as a part of what the Department of Education has talked about here, and we know that our extended closure is going to last indefinitely, which means we don't know when it's going to end, LEAs are faced with a choice of either providing no instruction or continuity of education. One of the things that came out yesterday is that the Department of Education is working with intermediate units across the state to be able to provide resources to those schools that may be struggling. So I think in the coming days, you're going to see more and more information about what that might look like. But we're really happy to be able to support that. But essentially what schools are doing is either going through a period of enrichment and review or planned instruction or some combination of those two things. And I'd ask you to think a little bit about which one you're doing, because as you approach those, they work very differently. So as a part of the webinar, I want to just also call your attention to the fact we know these are short webinars. And so I'm going to show you where you can get some additional resources. And we'll be able to post that information for you in just a moment. If I go over to the LearnOn website here, just to show you where you can get some additional resources, if you go under educators and you go under free online tools, if you go there, what you're going to find is that yesterday we talked about direct instruction, and there are tools that we talked about in that session listed there. So in this one where we talk about explaining, you can get a highlight of some of the tools that are coming here as well. Nicole just dropped the slide deck into the chat, so you should be able to make use of that. But during the short webinar, the caveat I have is we're not doing a full tutorial. We're going to show you a number of different tools to give you some options and ideas. And then from here, you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to work with some folks or play a little bit with yourself to try and get the implementation done. If you have a coach, please reach out to your instructional or your tech coaches. They're going to be able to help you with that. You can also email us. We have a number of tutorials that are in the background, and we can point you to some of those resources. But the outcome from this will be that you'll know the tools that to use when changing from a face-to-face classroom to explaining things online. And I also want to point out that this is actually sort of almost a part one of two. So at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be coming back to talk about question and answer. And if you think about explaining, maybe we have them backwards, like students ask questions and then you provide the answers and you explain them. So these two things kind of go together. So there are a few tools that'll be coming again for the afternoon at 1 o'clock. But I'll start with this. Explaining is a two-way street. And what I mean that is sometimes the teacher has to explain stuff to students, but I want students to explain their understanding of things to me, right? And I mean, that's how I know that they are getting the concepts that we're talking about. So when I talk about that, for me, I spent 27 years in the classroom as a physics teacher. I would ask my students, they would say, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like like, I think I understand it. And so my answer to them was actually a series of questions. What did you do? What did you find out? How do you know what you found out? Tell me those three things. So when I think of, for me as a teacher explaining things, what I will tell you is that I try to model my thinking for students. So in the tools that I'm using, you'll see that hopefully coming out as I elicit that thought process. But for students, I try and give them those three prompts to help them explain to me their understanding of the material that we've been working with. So a couple of considerations that you should think about as we work through explaining. One is, are you working with the student synchronously or asynchronously, right? Are you doing a live session or a recorded session, or a session where the students need to be able to get things explained to them when they need it, as opposed to during that live session? And of course, that makes a big difference, I think, in how you're going to provide those answers. And you probably need some combination of both. You also need to think about accessibility for students. And for the accessibility, again, whether they're working at like high bandwidth, low bandwidth, do they have a device? Which device do they have? But also you want to consider, this is a consideration, do you want the students to see each other's work? Because some of the tools that I'll show you are sort of one-to-one, teacher to student. Other tools are global in that the students can see each other's work. Now, almost all of the tools I have are going to be in a walled garden. So you can wall it off by your classroom, so you don't have to worry about somebody else coming in and seeing some of the other students' work. I also want you to think about how long does it take to explain something, and remembering that, when we talk about best practices, shorter is better. And so when you think about that, you want to chunk out your materials. If you're making videos, 6 minutes is the limit. And you think about the online webinars that we're doing. Normally I think when we do webinars, they're typically an hour. But in this day and age, which has come about so rapidly, if you're on, and I saw some of the names, I see some of you're on a lot of these webinars, it can be tiring to look at the screen all day long. And so we've tried to shorten the webinars down to 30 minutes or less. But that idea of chunking materials, so we're trying to bring stuff back to a shorter amount of time. You also want to pay attention to your students, one, their attention span based on their age, but also the legal questions of, can I use this tool with my students? And so I encourage you to look at the end user license agreement. You can look where it says privacy or terms of service. Typically at the bottom, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of a web page, you'll find that there. And make sure that you look at why or who can use it and what information might be collected. If you have any questions, address them to your tech directors. Can I use this tool? So when we think about tool choice, can I use this tool? Is it appropriate for my students? So those are the things to consider. Now, I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the tools that are live. And one of the things that I've done in the slide deck, so those of you that are accessing the slide deck, and it looks like there are some of you in there, is that I've created placeholders. So you'll see me jumping out sometimes and sort of demonstrating this, but you'll also see that there are screenshots to help remind you. So I may not get to every slide, but if you go through the slide deck, what you'll see is that there are those pieces there. So these are synchronous tools, right? When we talk about live, it's very much like what we're doing here. And you know, one way to explain things is via you know, video conference. So setting up a Zoom or Google Meet and using those to get online so that you can see students, because I want to see their face. You know, a lot of times when you're in the classroom, those of you that are veteran teachers know you can tell when a kid gets it or doesn't get it. And so if I want to make sure that they've got it, I want to see their face. So there is some part of that. But when I go to start writing on the board, there are a couple of tools that we'll highlight. Explain Everything is one, Google Jamboard is another, and Zoom is another. And yesterday when I talked about lectures, and if you want, you can go back to that recording, I demonstrated Explain Everything in Google Jamboard. Now, I do have them loaded up here on tabs. So you can see, like, I have Google Jamboard here, and I like this tool because it does give me the opportunity to write on a whiteboard. So if I grab the pen, right, I can write on the board. I'm using my mouse. So those of you that may have seen that yesterday, it can be tough for me to sometimes use my mouse to perhaps draw things. But I can bring images into this. So I could, you know, if I'm doing a lecture on cells, I can bring up the cell and then I can point and do things with that. And I can share just as I would with anybody else who uses a Google Doc. So when you think about a Google Doc, that's what this would provide me. For Explain Everything, it's very similar, but it's a little bit richer in terms of the number of tools that it has available. For one thing, you know, it does have like a full suite of tools here that you can see. It has a join code, so students can join in, and if there was somebody else joined in, they would be here, and you'll notice it says the word muted, and part of that is it has a microphone button, so I can explain my work as I go, which is how I typically do it on the board, right? So I'm like writing up on the board, and I write a line, and then I explain my thinking to the students. I write something else, and I explain my thinking. This type of tool does provide that opportunity for you. It's a pay-for tool that has is freemium. It allows you to have 3 boards. You know, and so, you know, I sort of juggle around with the different boards that I'm using. So those are two of the tools. And I saw somebody talked about EduCreations. So if you want to do EduCreations, which is very much like this, but it's an iPad app, you would have to mirror EduCreations to your computer. So if you can do that through AirPlay, and you'll see an example of that here in just a moment, but that's how you're going to try and do it. But it is tough to mirror, and so that would be to do what I'm going to do, and you'll see I'll probably have some issues, but it's really tough to do that with some of these, and so that's why I like being able to use these apps. With Explain Everything, what I can do is I have my iPad here, and so I have my iPad and my stylus or my Apple Pencil, and I can write on it and it'll appear on the screen. So just as I'm mirroring right now is how I would use Explain Everything. And that we tested out again in the lecture series yesterday, and that worked out really well for us. So if I go back and think about accessibility and closed captioning, I'm going to highlight how to do that in just a moment. But closed captioning is a great way to help with the accessibility pieces. And I demonstrated this yesterday, and I have a nice slide there to sort of help you with the picture. And I'll demonstrate that real quick here. So if I have the same slide deck open here, but not, you'll notice that this is in the preview mode. So you don't see at the top, right, as I point to my computer that you can't see. Right at the top, you don't see the menus, but here you see the menus and things like that. And so I'm about to put it into presentation mode. And when I do that, you're going to get a bar that looks just like this at the bottom, and there will be a closed captioning button that appears. And so if I click on this and it loads, I'm going to first change down here. And then if I click closed captioning, the closed captioning will begin to capture everything that I'm saying. One thing I've noticed with math, so if I'm trying to do math and I'm trying to do closed captioning, I say like x squared plus y squared, right? The students have to read it out. But it does work pretty well for the types of services that you would look for closed captioning. So if you have students, you can record that as a part of your window. And one of the things that I do sometimes for explaining, if I'm trying to get closed captioning, what I will do is I will do what I just did, was put it into closed captioning mode, and then I will shrink that web browser all the way down to the bottom, so it's just a little sliver, and all I can see is the captioning. And then I'll pull up explain everything. And so the closed captioning will be at the bottom, and explain everything will be on that tab, and the students can see both of them. Now, in order to do that, when I hit share, I have to share my desktop. So that's another possibility. And I also want to talk about using a document camera. So I don't know if you guys have used document cameras in your classroom, but I'd love to be able to use a document camera. And so I have a solution for you that is currently free. You have to do a little bit of work to get things started here. So I'm sort of arranging things. And so I'm going to show you that. So I've stopped sharing my screen for a moment because I need to bring up an app called Visualizer, and it comes from IPEVO. And I'm going to share my screen again. And hopefully this is working for you guys, and it looks like it is. So this is Visualizer, and if I scroll over it, what you'll see is you can choose your camera. Now, right now, the only camera is my computer camera, so the one that I'm pointing at, but I have my phone, and on my phone, I have something called iDocCam. And iDocCam is a pay-for app that has gone free through April 30th. So you would want to download it before then, and I've opened the app here. So the app is on my phone, open there, so you can sort of see it's just a camera. And now when I go back and I choose, my camera is now on, is one of the choices. And when I choose, it's going to switch to the camera on my phone. Now, I caution you, those that might get seasick, you might not want to watch this because I'm going to do some things in a moment here. And I'm going to switch it over. And one of the things, this is my setup. So just so you can see, I took a stack of games and I put a little piece of paper down here. And what you'll notice is it doesn't look quite right. So what I need to do is I need to rotate. So I apologize, but there I've rotated. So I just wanted you to be able to see my setup, okay? This is available on iOS and Android, okay? So it works fine. The biggest thing is that my phone has to be on the same network as my computer. If you're in the house, that's probably the case. Okay, so again, avert your eyes for a moment. And what I did now was I just set my camera down on top of the games that I had there. So, you know, during this little issue, we've been playing a lot of games in my house. And so now I got my Sharpie that you can't see, but what you can see is that I'm able to draw on here. So, so now I can write. And of course, I don't have myself set up perfectly. Those of you can sort of see, I'd move my chair so that I can actually set things up perfectly. And yes, for those of you that are wondering, I do collect baseball and hockey cards. And so to my wife's chagrin, that's what you see sort of piled up around here. So this gives me a solution that allows me to use a document camera. And if I'm explaining things to students, I really like the way that, that this sort of operates for students. So I'm going to stop that share for a moment, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to share my screen, but this time, when you go to hit share screen in Zoom, what you see come up is there's going to be a place that right beside desktop 1, it says whiteboard. So let me share that so that you can see. And now I have a whiteboard screen right in Zoom. And so, so this is my Zoom whiteboard screen. And again, I'm using my mouse. Now, if you start from an iPad, I believe that you can actually use this to share, and that'll make it work a little bit better. You'll have to turn your camera off, because if you're moving your iPad around, then it doesn't work that well. I can also, if I wanted to, under share, you can give mouse access to other students, which allows them to work on things. So so this is just another way that you can sort of, instead of sharing my desktop, I can share. And I'm going to go back, and once again I'm going to share my screen. So again, I apologize for putting you guys in and out of full screen, but as I go back here, so I demonstrated the camera, but I also want to show you that there's a set of tools that come up, and I'm going to highlight here. So when you go to Zoom, of course, that's the whiteboard selection that you want, but there's also a place to annotate. And when I click annotate, there's another set of tools that come up, and that other set of tools will allow you to mark up things. So I can stamp things with like, or I can draw. I'm gonna stamp, let's see, I'll use my little arrow here, right? And I can like point to different things. You can draw on here, you can write text, and those things are over top, and then I can clear all my drawings off. So I would encourage you to play around with those tools a little bit for yourself. And of course, got to go back to my mouse before I can move on. So we talked about Explain Everything, we talked about Google Jamboard, we talked about accessibility, and here's the information on IPEVO. So you need two pieces. You need the visualizer and you need the doc cam. And I want you to consider one other thing. If you look at the picture down below, that's a picture from my camera of my iPad. So if I want to demonstrate to students, like I want to say, hey, I want you guys to make use of this setup, I can put my iPad underneath and I can demonstrate to students what's happening. And so in that way, you might have to get creative in how you're doing it, but if you're trying to demonstrate to students what they're going to see on the screen, that helps them to be able to follow along with the instructions you might need to give them. All right, so that was the live piece. Let's talk a little bit about the asynchronous piece and what you might do. And of course, the first thing is you could just record all the synchronous stuff. So everything that I've done, you can record. So set up your document camera so that you can write things out, and you can record in Zoom doing just what I just did, which we are, and then I can push that out. And so I can record all of those different pieces that way. But there are some other ways that you can do some things, including Flipgrid. So with Flipgrid, what's going to happen is I'm going to show you what it looks like on the educator side. So for Flipgrid, here's my Flipgrid, and I have, in this particular account, I have 2 topics, right? So and actually, when I start something, I can create a new topic. So I have multiple Flipgrids, and then within that, I have multiple topics. So I would actually start one that would just say explaining the homework. And then I would be the only one who actually goes into the Flipgrid and posts that. Now, when you want to share that information with the students, you can click on this button and you'll notice there's a QR code. So you can give that to students. And the nice thing about this is if you give them the QR code, it's going to take them right to the app, right to a place where they can actually go and put their explanation in. So thinking about students giving the explanation. Let me show you what this looks like for the student side. So I stopped sharing my screen for a moment. I'm going to share it again. And now what you'll see is, and if you want to test this out, I went into incognito mode and I took the little link that it gave me and I just populated it in. Now, to go to incognito mode, you would just click on the 3 dots and go to incognito mode. And so this way I can see. Now I'm not logged in. It doesn't I just want to see what the students are going to see there. And this is what they see. So it's called explaining to students. There are 2 topics if they wanted to switch them out. And it says, please make a video that tells you how to explain things. So I put that prompt in. It'll read that prompt to them if they need it. And then when they're ready, they're going to click record a response. Now, I don't want to break things, and my camera is being used by Zoom, but what I'll tell you is that's going to bring up a window, and it's going to ask me to start recording, and it's that simple. And it's going to post tiles on the screen so that I can see all of the different responses. So I think that as you think about that, it becomes a way that you can look at things. So I want to show you something else here. So that's what the students see. I'm going to jump back over to my other screen. And so what you can see is I've made these public. If you don't want them to be public, there is a way for you to make it so that only your students are in there. But let me at least show you what one of these might look like. So you can see I have 14 videos in here. And what we did was we asked folks at our industry partnership boot camp to be able to post their solutions, and then you can see I can just go right through these. And it's a limit. I limit it. You can limit it to 30 seconds, a minute and a half. For me, I always try and limit it to a minute. If you can't tell me what you did, what you found out, and what you know in less than a minute, then you probably need to rethink what you're looking at. So Flipgrid is a great way to again have students explain, but thinking about from a teacher perspective, if I want to have a whole series of things and I want to make them quick, I'm going to go to that Flipgrid. I'm going to hit the green plus. I'm going to record what I have to say to them. It might be just a daily message. I think I mentioned yesterday, you know, like I might have the joke of the day. And so I might just record in 30 seconds or less my joke of the day, and it'll be in there. And then the second topic would be homework help. And then I would just title it, this is homework help for number 3. And I would click the button, and in a minute or less, I'm going to record my answer, my explanation to students. So I think that becomes a good way to sort of have students do it. And Padlet is another one. And I'll show you a Padlet here as well. If I jump over to a Padlet, this is the exact same Padlet we used yesterday. You're welcome to post on this Padlet, so it's linked in the slide deck. And to post, you simply go down to this little plus down here, and then you can click or you can double click. And when it comes up, what you'll see is you can put a title and write something, but you can also use tools. So you can use the camera button. So if you think about, like if I hold up my explanation like this, I can hold that up and I can get that picture in there. And so this could be, instead of these tiles being the piece that they're sharing, I could be posting things like homework help for question number 1, number 5, number 7, and then it becomes one tiled place where I'm explaining to students what's happening there. And when I click under here, you can see you can upload lots of different things. So if you've made, you know, a Google drawing, or you have a video, or you just want to record your audio, you can do that right from here into Padlet. And so Padlet becomes a really powerful way to work with students. And then I need to get the information out to kids. And to get this out, I use 2 tools. I use either Twitter or Remind. So let me show you what Remind looks like. So Twitter, actually, if I were using Twitter, and here I'm on a Jamboard. So if I fixed up my Jamboard and I had it the way I wanted, and I wanted to tweet this out to my students, I have taken a Google Chrome extension called Share on Twitter. And if I click that button, notice it's going to send this out on Twitter, and it's going to have the link to it. So it's coming right from my account. And so I just need to make sure that that I'm logged into my account, and then this would get out to students. I'm trying to think of ways that I can get information out quickly, so that if I'm using some type of website, or if I jump over to explain everything again, like it is dependent, and it's going to give me the information right there, so I don't have to worry about going and getting something from Twitter. Now, Remind is a little bit different. Remind actually sends text messages or emails to students. And so I've created a class here, and if I click on message, what I can do is just click as you would normally do for a message, and then I can type and say, I'm going to send this out to my whole class. And again, I would just send them the link of the information that I want. So if I hit continue, I just type my message in and say, hey folks, I got an answer to number 3 for you. Here you go. And then the students get a text message with that link on their phone, and they can go through. And the nice thing about Remind is it protects personal information, so you don't have to worry about whether or not the students have the appropriate, whether they have your phone number or anything like that. So that's another great way for you to work through things. And I just want to highlight and sort of quickly recap what we've talked about here in this short time. So we talked about Flipgrid. I want to remind you that you can select, it says select a grid, and then you can select school email. So students using it have to use their school email. So I made mine public, but you would probably make it so only your school email is available, and then it gives you the code down at the bottom. So that's a little reminder. And then for the student side, they just click the plus sign, and when they click the plus sign, the screen you see there with my smiling face, that's what the students see. And so they can mark it up with emojis and text and other information, and then they can post that information onto your Flipgrid. For Padlet, we talked a little bit about that. If you want to post to my Padlet, you're welcome to. You title it, you write something, and then you can click any of these tools to do what you want. This will embed a web page. You can also click the 3 dots, and there are tons of choices that are in there for you to work from. And then for Remind, this is a good way to get that information, those explanations that you've created for students, out to them and into their hands on the devices that they use. Twitter is another place that you'll use, and what you'll notice here is that I created my own hashtag. So I was a physics teacher at Redline, and we would say physics is fun with a PH. And so my hashtag RLFun was something that my students could follow so that they could get updates from me on the information that was important for the class. So as we come to the conclusion here, hopefully we were able to answer those questions that you might have had along the way, but feel free to populate the Q&A pod with any other questions you might have as I wrap things up with you guys. I would just also like to remind you that you need to really consider what tools you're going to use. So some of the things I did here, they're a little bit complex, like using the document camera, but if it's really important to you, then we've got to find a way. And so I think there are ways that we can do all these types of things with our students. And I appreciate the pieces that you guys are populating in here. And so, it's just one of those things that that I think if we just sort of take a deep breath and we ask questions, people, for the most part, are really willing to help out. And so, so we can go through that. I saw that somebody populated a question that says, I'm a little bit behind. Can you show how to link i.cam from the phone to the computer? And one of the things I'll tell you is I didn't do anything. All I did was open up the app on my phone, and then in Visualizer, and I'll show that again real quick. So this is Visualizer, which is on my computer. So that's what you're looking at now. And right here, there's a button that says Select Camera. So if I click on it and I don't have my phone on, nothing's there, right? The only thing I can see is the camera on this computer. Now, if you had any other cameras plugged into this, it would choose them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my phone. Let me make sure this is all working the way it should. Looks like it is. Grab my phone and I open up i.cam on here. I don't have to do anything else. As long as they're on the same network, when I go back over here, there's the phone. And so if I switch it over, you see a mess, okay? So with that, I'm gonna stop my share. And that's how you can use that. Just as a reminder, you can find all of our webinars up on LearnOn. They're right on the front page. So if I go back to the LearnOn site, you'll see the webinar schedule here for today. at 12 o'clock, there are office hours on writing to read and a webinar coming up on supporting learners in math. I will be back at 1 o'clock for face-to-face online answering questions and creating FAQs. So that'll be the piece that I'm doing next. I just remind you, please fill out the evaluation. I have a feeling if Nicole hasn't done it yet, she'll be populating that link into the chat. We really need the feedback for being able to improve not only what we're doing, but we're going through and we're actually looking at what you have suggested, and we're trying to make adjustments for next week. So we are looking at that, and we're trying to get that information. The link down here at the bottom is the LearnOn link. It'll kick you out when we close this off here in a moment, and hit continue, and then you can move on to the Act 48 page, where you can put in your PPID to get credit for coming to this. Somebody gave me an FYI that the MacBook has 3 lines in the bottom left corner for the camera options, so there's another option for you. Again, we know, one thing, we're learning a lot. So I know I appreciate the time you guys spent here this morning. We're going to end the webinar in just about 30 seconds. We did get another question in, can you do tutorials on Flipgrid and Wakelet or First? I believe, and I'm not positive, so I'm going to just take a chance here. Under the tools, free online tools, if you click down on here, we have some. So there's one for Flipgrid and there's one for Wakelet. So if you're looking for those, and I'm going to show you that again. So I'm on the LearnOn site. I'm going to go back to home here for a moment. If I click here and then click on the free online tools, the down arrow, then you'll see that we have tutorials and helpful hints on all of these. So if I go to Flipgrid, it's going to have the basics of getting started and how to make use of it, including other resources for how to use Flipgrid. So those pieces are already out there for those particular tools. And again, if you want to see that list of tools, you can check them out on your own, but that's how we're helping you guys that way. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much. We appreciate this. We're going to stop this session, and we're going to get you guys ready for the 12 o'clock one for those that are looking for math. Thank you. Have a good day.